Thank you for having me.
So, I mean, this is being described as historic in this decision. Um, Tell us why and why it's so consequential for the survivors of these atrocities in the DRC.
Thank you so much. This decision is significant, and not just for the brave women of Fizi in DRC, but for women in Africa who are going through armed conflict, or women in armed conflict in different states in Africa. The decision is also significant because and historic because it is part of Africa's growing jurisprudence on upholding the rights
Mm.
of women in conflict, as you have seen. And as you have rightly mentioned, the decision has outlined quite a number of measures, reparation measures for the survivors in DRC, and of course, setting a very strong precedent. So it's quite historic. And as you will see in our conversation, the decision also is demanding systemic change beyond monetary compensation, is demanding systemic change to prevent repetition of those crimes, and also to build a culture of accountability in DRC.
Beyond the monetary measures, which reparations do you think is probably the most important and why?
Um, in international humanitarian law, we are required, or governments are required, to come up with a number of reparation measures. And one of them, which we can talk about, is the public apology and the integration of human rights training in institutions in DRC, such as the judiciary, the military, as well as publication of the decision in DRC's official gazette. Why this is important is one of the ways to effectively ensure that the state is taking responsibility and accountability for the survivors is by the publishing and issuing of a public apology. This is essential because it helps the government or the state to ensure that the survivors, their status as survivors is officially recognized by the government. In some countries, such as Colombia, they have like memorials erected, and they have public awareness campaigns that will help people to really understand and comprehend the impact of the atrocities that happened to these survivors, and also to comprehend the impact that the atrocities has had on their lives, and also to comprehend the extent to which their lives will never be the same pre-war, and how they cannot go back to that situation. So the publication of the apology, the integration of the human rights training, and the publication of the African Commission decision by DRC on its official gazette, it helps us to comprehend the lived realities of these survivors. So I would say it is about transformative justice, and also the human rights integration in those institutions is about changing institutional culture. And publishing the decision is about fostering transparency and accountability on the side of the government, and just saying, you know what, that we have realized that sexual violence in armed conflict is not a collateral damage, but a serious human rights violation.
I suppose a commission ruling such as this is very important and significant. Compliance becomes the next layer, and I'm sure that this is probably going to face some political challenges. Do you think we'll see compliance?
I must say that in any event where we have received decisions in whichever court, implementation, especially in Africa, is always the real test. And the decision, unfortunately or fortunately, coincides with ongoing conflict in DRC. It's currently ongoing. And we also have cases that have been reported on sexual violence, and women continue to suffer. But I would say all hope is not lost, because one of the things that the African Commission has reminded us is that sexual violence in armed conflict is not a collateral damage, but a serious violation of human rights, and as a weapon of war. So it therefore remains a critical and important jurisprudence, even in the ongoing in the ongoing conflict. So the hope is that the decision is going to put pressure on the DRC government to act, and failure to comply on the side of DRC is not just a legal issue, but also a moral issue. So the human rights training that have been outlined by the African Commission as well is not just symbolic, but it is measures that are going to force the state institutions to fully engage. And this is the military, the judiciary, even the health providers, to really engage in conversations, national conversations on the ongoing conflict. All in all, we are relying on the political will of the DRC to act upon this decision, and also the decision by the African Commission to have DRC report within 6 months gives us an upper hand as civil society and other stakeholders to really follow up and track progress.
And perhaps finally, what would you like people across the continent, policymakers, civil society, media, and even ordinary citizens, what should they take away from this ruling?
Number one is that the African Commission has once again reinforced the Africa's promise, which is the Maputo Protocol, that has been there to fight for the rights of women and girls. I think it is our promise, and we are really happy that the African Commission and once again the Maputo Protocol has come to that front. The other thing is that impunity has consequences, and using sexual violence as a weapon of war in conflict eventually catches up. And again, as I have said before, sexual violence is not collateral damage, and other countries that have armed conflict ongoing should come to realize that eventually the law will catch up with them.
Mumbi, we're going to leave it there. Thank you very, very much indeed for joining us and talking to us about this very important ruling. And let's hope that its consequences are felt far and wide. Thank you so much. That was Mumbi Mugo from Equality Now speaking to us about this landmark ruling that could reshape how conflict-related sexual violence is addressed across the continent.
From Cape to